there, I'm Sandy Reese, Chief Encouragement Officer here at Get Fully Funded, where we help small nonprofits learn how to raise the money they need to fully fund their mission. I'm here to help you learn how to master the art and science of fundraising. And I've got a great tip for you in just a moment. But before we get to that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that the next time we post a really great tip like this one, you're among the first to know. Okay, on to this week's tip.
Now, if you're like most, when I say, hey, how are your board meetings? You probably have some version of, either rolling your eyes or grunting, groaning because your board meetings are not fun. They're a drag. They probably go way too long. You probably have one or two people who do all of the talking. Maybe you dread it. Maybe you can't even get all your board members to show up. And you know why? Because they dread it too. So how do you turn that all around and make it a fun meeting where things actually get done and people are excited to attend and they're raising their hand saying, hey, let me help you with this. Let me take care of that. That sounds really good, right? So there's a couple of things that you can do to make your board meetings more fun and more productive. The first thing that I want to share with you is it's actually in an article on our blog over at getfullyfunded.com/blog, and it is to use a consent agenda. A consent agenda is a very cool thing, and it's going to get you focused in the right direction. Think about this. At most board meetings, what do? You start with, well, let's approve the minutes. I've even seen board meetings where somebody reads the minutes. OMG, can you please no. That is torture of the highest level. So you're going over the minutes and people are like, there's a comma left out on line 3. Like, no, we don't need to spend our time doing stuff like that. Well, then you get into the finance reports and somebody goes through and hits the highlights, and then the executive director gives their report, and then the operations gives their report, and you got committee reports. And then you look up and you have like 10 minutes left in your meeting. You haven't talked about anything of value. So I want you to imagine with me for a minute that I am standing on a timeline. Let me see if I can get my hands up here. Okay, and that way is the past, and this way is the future. Where should you be focused in your board meeting? Future. Except that most of the time in our board meetings, we spend all of our time looking backward. We're looking at what happened last month. We're reading last month's minutes, last month's finances, reports from last month. And we don't spend any time looking ahead. It's very difficult to lead your nonprofit into greater levels of success if all you're doing is spending your time looking backward. And it's not even backward in a productive manner. We're looking backward to make sure we've got all these reports, quote, right. So here's what a consent agenda does for you. You get all your board members committed that they will do this. This doesn't work unless everybody says, yes, I'm in. And what you do is all that stuff that you spend looking backward into, the minutes, the finance reports, the operations report, ED report, whatever, all the reports, and that emails out to all the board members 4 or 5 days or even a week ahead of the board meeting. The commitment from them is that they will look at all of that, they will read it, and if they have questions, they will reach out. So if they have a question about something in the minutes, they reach out to the secretary, take care of that. If it's a huge issue, then they can bring it to the board meeting. If it's a little tiny thing, like you left this comment out, that gets handled and moved aside. It never even pops up in your board meeting. That sounds better already, doesn't it? So what happens then is your agenda for your board meeting has a welcome. If your organization is faith-based, there's a prayer. And then the very next thing is consent agenda. And you list out minutes, finance report, executive director report, operations report, fundraising committee, blah, blah, blah. Whatever all the reports are listed right out there. And so what you do is you have somebody make a motion to approve the consent agenda. And what that does, it approves everything in one fell swoop without looking at any of it at the board meeting. Okay, you with me? Now, again, this only works if board members are willing to look at all this stuff ahead of time. So if they have done their work and they have read all that stuff and they understand it, they don't have questions, somebody makes a motion to approve all of that, someone seconds it, you vote on it, boom, done. And within 5 minutes of starting the meeting, you are now focused on the future. You are now focused on what's coming up for your organization. You're focused on bigger picture things. Doesn't that sound better? It's amazing, and it will change. It changes the whole dynamic of the meeting. I have been in those board meetings where people read the minutes. I cannot deal with that. I've been in those ones where people basically go through their written report. So maybe they sent out a written report, but now they're basically rehashing everything that was in the written report. I don't need that. Like I'm an adult. I can read your report. I can ask questions if I have it. Yeah. Now, what happens if there's a legitimate question? Like, let's say somebody's got a legitimate question on the finance report. Then, when there's a motion made to accept the consent agenda, somebody says, I have a question about the finance report. Can we pull that out? Then your chair says, yep, we can do that. Anything else? No. Okay, then there's a motion on the floor to approve the consent agenda minus the finance report. Do I hear a second? You go on through the process, you approve that consent agenda, and then you say, okay, now we have the finance report. What's your question? Person asks the question, there's discussion, get it resolved, then you approve the finance report. It takes a little bit longer, but if that question is a valid question, then that's important to bring that out and discuss it at the board level. But still, you can get that handled quickly and move on and spend your time talking about things of a strategic nature. So you're talking about what's coming up for your organization, things that are happening that are impacting your organization, like what's your response to COVID? How is COVID-19 impacting your organization? What do you need to be thinking about differently? How do you need to be handling things differently? How do you need to be making things safe for your volunteers? So you can have those kind of conversations at the board level. You can talk about things of a strategic nature. You can talk about fundraising because funds, like that's important. Revenue is important for every nonprofit, right? When you spend all of your time looking backward, you don't, like, it's boring, it's dull. People are going to disengage and you're going to see attendance drop off. If you spend your time looking forward into the future and talking about things that matter, that's way more important. Then what you also have to do from a facilitation point of view, so whoever's running your meeting, you got to make sure that you have an agenda that's been planned out so that you're talking about things that the board needs to be talking about. It's not nitty-gritty operational things. It's not getting into the details of things they don't need to be into, but it's purposefully chosen things that the board needs to be aware of and they need to discuss. And you make sure that everybody contributes to the conversation. So you don't allow any one person to monopolize the conversation. And if you have somebody like who is very quiet and they don't say much, then at some point you say, hey, Sue, I noticed you've been kind of quiet. What are your thoughts on this topic? And that way you're kind of telling everybody else to shush for a minute. So you're clearing the table for Sue to speak up and share her thoughts. Every time I've ever done that or seen that done in a meeting, that person always has something profound to share. They just, for whatever reason, have not jumped into the fray of the conversation to share it. So you make sure that everybody is participating, conversation is of value, you're staying on track, you end on time. That's how you start to create a really awesome board meeting. Those are the meetings that people find that are fun, they're engaging, people leave, they're excited, they're looking forward to what they can do next to support the organization. Changes the game for your organization when your board is engaged and excited. So try that out. Use the consent agenda. And if you're not sure exactly how that works, go over to getfullyfunded.com/blog. And we have an article on how to run a fun and productive board meeting. And that is part of that article, how to use a consent agenda. You can get more tips just like this over on the blog. There's a ton of resources there. Go take advantage of all of it. I'll be back next week with another fundraising tip of the week just for you guys. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.